Hello and welcome everyone to episode 5 of our Convention of States Michigan podcast series. My name is Robin Riddell. I am the State Communications Coordinator for Convention of States here in Michigan. Our grassroots team is working tirelessly to pass a resolution in the state legislature calling for a Convention of States, which is provided for in Article 5 of the Constitution. This podcast is just one way to bring you the information you need to help us grow our Michigan grassroots army. First, let's meet our co-host, Kelly Oldford.
That's right. Thank you, Robin. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's listening in, looking to get some more information about Convention of States and especially what's happening here in Michigan. My name is Kelly Oldford. I'm a district captain for Convention of States here in Michigan. I live in the St. Clair, kind of the southern part of the Thumb area in St. Clair County. And I'm a district captain in that area. I do a lot of communications work for Convention of States here in Michigan as well. So everything that I do is right here within the state and a lot right within the thumb too. So thank you for having me, Robin. As always, I'm happy to be here.
Great. Our guest today is Bruce Finlayson. Bruce is a regional captain for Convention of States Michigan. His region is Northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, a vast area to anyone who has been up there. He's leading our volunteers, talking to legislators, and growing the grassroots army. Quick Michigan question for you, Bruce. Since you live in what I call up north, what is up north to you?
What is up north to me? Well, up north Michigan is a little bit of God's country to me, with all the lakes and the hills and just the beautiful area that I live in. I've been all over the world. I've been to Switzerland and so forth. There's a lot of similarities between northern Michigan and what Switzerland looks like, minus the big mountains, but we do have hills.
Yeah, good skiing up there. Well, Bruce, would you tell us what drew you to become involved with the Convention of States movement?
Well, very simply, I've noticed a continuing erosion of our freedoms, freedom of speech, the Second Amendment with gun rights, a porous border that's not controlled by the federal government. They're not doing their job. Debt that's almost unbelievable. It's over $30 trillion. It'll be passed on to our kids and our grandkids. And so I think the country's been heading in the wrong direction for a long time, has gone away from the principles that made us great. And I'm a firm believer in the Constitution and the way that the founding fathers created it, which was based on federalism and state rights to balance against the federal government.
So Bruce, could you maybe share with all of us what is, some of the stuff you've been working on, some of the work that you've been doing for Convention of States in Michigan and in your region, all over the northern Michigan?
Sure. It's been across 17 different House districts and 6 different Senate districts. And over the last 18 months, we've done a number of town halls. We've had them in Traverse City and Frankfort, Charlevoix, Marquette, Petoskey, Grayling, Alpena, and even down in Shelby Township. And again, this is roughly over the last 18 months. Gun shows, we've done gun shows in Cadillac, Holton Lake, Gaylord, Sheboygan, Petoskey, Roscommon, and those are the gun shows. And festivals, we've done the Fireman's Festival in Roscommon, we've done the Cherry Festival in Traverse City. We've done the UP State Fair this last summer in August up in Escanaba. And we've also done a fair in Petoskey. So we've been trying to move around as much as we possibly can to get the word out, because we have typically what we find at the gun shows and festivals, maybe 10% of the people understand what the Convention of States project is all about, and the same for gun shows. So it's a real educational objective that we have, and we have to get the word out.
How many people are you working with to be able to cover that much ground?
Well, I've had generally speaking, we've had 12 district captains and then a number of, volunteers in each of the House districts and volunteers across the geography of the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula, which is roughly, if you drew a line across from the top of the thumb, more or less that's our area. We dip down to Muskegon on the left-hand side, but that's pretty much our area. It's a huge area, sometimes hours between some of the volunteers.
You need more volunteers then?
We need more volunteers. Yes, we need more district captains, and we need more volunteers because as we all know, the district captain plays a critical role. It's really a networking role, an educational role, and ideally, you would have one in each House district. We've had at times had the district captains to actually handle 2 House districts to double up, if you will, because we didn't have anybody there. So we're working hard to fill each of our House districts with a district captain.
Very good.
With this podcast, we're hoping that more people will be informed and ready to step up and volunteer, whether you live down at the Indiana border or up at the northernmost end of the Upper Peninsula. We can use more volunteers. Bruce, you're a Convention of States leader. You have this big region, and we know that there's a lot of information to share about Convention of States and Article 5. How do you convey to people who are just learning about this for the first time? How do you explain Article 5 and its history?
Okay. Well, I start off by saying that it's in the U.S. Constitution, and it was put there by our founding fathers, and it was put there for a reason. The founding fathers knew history; they knew the history of great nations and why those nations ceased to be, and typically they ceased to be because it turned into whatever form of government. It turned into tyranny. Eventually, communism, socialism. Just plain dictatorship, etc. We see that around the world today. And so they gave us Article 5 because they knew that sooner or later governments become tyrannical. And so that's why they set the Constitution up, set up the concept of federalism and states' rights to balance out against the power of the federal government, looking for a balance. That's why we have 3 branches of government, those to provide the checks and balances, to make it difficult for tyranny in one part of the government to take over another part of the government. So all of that is by design, and so I start off with that explanation and say, now the founding fathers put specifically a couple sentences in Article 5 because they knew sooner or later tyranny would come about, and so they gave the states a way to work around the federal government when it became too powerful to call a convention when 2/3 of the states did. And that's why we're working to do that. We're at 19, we got to get to 34. And once we get to 34, Congress has a ministerial duty that's been proven in past court cases. They have to call the convention. So when they do that, we'll get all 50 states together. Each will have 1 vote. We will debate for some amount of time. My guess is that's going to be several months over the 3 areas that we're looking to bring about proposed amendments. And the key is that these are proposed amendments. They're not amendments until they come out of the convention, go back to Congress, and then quickly come back out to the states, where 3/4 of the states have to approve, just like the 27 amendments that we have today. It will have to be approved by 3/4 of the states. So it's a very high bar. It's very unlikely that any bad proposed amendment would come out, or silly amendment, whatever you want to call it, because it only takes 13 states in either the House or the Senate in a particular state to say no, and that takes care of that particular amendment. So it's a very, very high bar, but it forces the delegates to have a lot of great conversations about the direction of this country and what the structural changes do we need to make sure that we protect this constitutional republic.
Who is it that you are referring to when you say delegates?
Now, delegates will be chosen in each state by the legislature, and it varies. It's not the same rules in all 50 states, but each state will decide the rules upon which they will, and who they will decide to send to they're sometimes called commissioners, but they're delegates to the convention. Each state, again, no matter how many delegates you send, you could send one, you can send 100, but they get one vote on each particular amendment that goes for a floor vote at the convention. And if they don't, if the delegates do not follow the directions of a particular state, they can be recalled. And in some states, they can even be liable for a felony and potentially go to jail. So there's some pretty good safeguards.
Like you said, a very high bar for
Very
all
high.
of that. I have a question. What do you say to some of the critics who say, oh, you're going to destroy the Constitution? What do you say to those people?
Well, I say to those people that, first of all, we elected our own legislators, and so we have influence over the people that we've elected, and most of them are trying to do the right thing. All of those people have taken an oath to support the Constitution, so that's what I tell them. It's very unlikely that our House reps and our senators will not, at the end of the day, listen to what the people want, because this is really coming from the people, and it's to give them more power. It's to give our legislatures and the state legislators more power, bring decisions back to local government, as opposed to unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., trying to impose one size fits all in all 50 states.
You mentioned a little bit ago too about 3 areas or 3 topics or something that that we would be discussing at a convention, with delegates that would be going to a convention. What are those 3 areas that you were referring to?
Yeah, be glad to talk about that. And by the way, we call that the Convention States Resolution in each state, and it's virtually the same exact words in each of the 50 states, the same resolution. And we can only bring 3 things up at a convention state per the Convention States Resolution. First is term limits for Congress and officials and judges, including the Supreme Court, by the way. But again, all of this is to be figured out at the convention. The second thing is fiscal restraints. It could be typically thought of as a balanced budget amendment, but it could also be some spending tied to GDP. That's another possible area. But the point is to rein in the uncontrollable spending that we're now over with, what, $32 trillion right now, and that's not even the unfunded. That's the funded ones. The underfunded is supposedly around 150 trillion. And the third is to rein in the jurisdiction and power of the federal government. So bring power back to the states. Some potential amendments could be that there'll only be 9 Supreme Court justices, so you can't pack the court. So that's another potential amendment. So those are ways to save again our constitutional republic along the lines that the U.S. Constitution was written.
It's going to make for an interesting discussion, don't you think? Those topics.
It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be it'll be exciting, and I'm sure there'll be some fireworks. But it'll force the, in my opinion, it's going to force a great discussion, no matter what comes out of it. And it's possible that we won't agree on any particular legislation or proposed amendment that comes out of the Constitution, but it's going to be a wonderful discussion between conservative states, liberal states, and I suspect that a lot of the commissioners / delegates go there, and then from that, us back home will learn a lot about the fundamentals of the U.S. Constitution.
Absolutely. Kelly, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I was just mainly wondering, so as part of the kind of Article 5 history that you've been talking about, and that you've been sharing with us. Can you kind of explain to us where the Convention of States project, our national organization, we have our state level organization, and kind of that grassroots army that we're always talking about, where are we actually drawing our authority and our legal authority to actually hold an Article 5 convention? Where is that even coming from?
Well, it comes out right out of the U.S. Constitution in Article 5, which is the article that deals with proposing amendments. So the founders put it in there they put it in there, and then George Mason, after looking at it, said, well, what about when the federal government becomes tyrannical, that all of the governments that we've been talking about in history, we got to give the states the power to counterbalance the federal government when it overreaches. And so that's where it's at. It's right there from 1787 in the Constitutional Convention. And by unanimous vote, I might add, unanimous vote by all the founding fathers.
So Article 5 was added as and part of a unanimous vote?
The part of the Article 5 that deals with the Convention of States, those two sentences, that was unanimous.
Gotcha. Very good.
I've said this before, but the first time I heard about Convention of States and listened to a presentation, when you can see the text on that original document and it says Article 5, it for me, I got excited because it was right there. It's been there the whole time. But we think that it's just Congress that makes laws and we're subjected to what they do. We have a tool here. And to me, that provides hope for the future.
Absolutely, Robin. Until I got involved 3 or 4 years ago, I had my minor was political science, and I had forgotten about Article 5 in the Constitution, and more importantly, the option for the states to call a convention of states to counteract federal government overreach and tyranny. So it's a wonderful tool, the Convention of the States, because it's taking power away from the federal government and bringing it back to people.
We are a movement for people who want to be self-governing.
Yep. So this whole movement is to get people involved at the local level, to become county commissioners, to get on their school board and make these changes at the local level. So then they will bubble up to the state legislators, the House reps and the senators, right? And so that then we put pressure on them and we influence them as to why this is important. And they ought to mostly like it because it's bringing back power to them as opposed to everything coming out of Washington, D.C.
Right.
So those that like freedom, those that want to make decisions close to where the problem is, it's very, very important. The latest surveys that we've done from Trafalgar indicates 52% of Democrats favor Convention of States, 66% of independents, and 72% of Republicans. So overall, across the United States, it's 62%. So it's almost 2/3 of people that agree with the Convention of States resolution. So we've got the backing of the majority of the American people if we get them engaged and have them engaged with their state legislatures.
It's our time to fight.
Our time to fight. Yeah, you got to fight. We have to fight smart.
That was some great information. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of travel when you have a big geographic area like we have here, and so we're hoping to bring on more, not only more more captains, if you will, district captains in the House districts. And some of our House districts are so big, we could really have 2 or 3 district captains per House district, particularly in the Upper Peninsula. And we're looking to get obviously develop more regional captains like myself, so that I don't have to drive 7 hours up to Marquette to do something. We set a record for petitions that were signed at the UP State Fair. We had 219 on a Saturday. That was the best we've done in Michigan, because again, most of the cities here are pretty small. So that was worth the drive.
Well, Bruce, you just provided the perfect segue for us to encourage people who are listening to join us. Go to conventionofstates.com. Everything you want to know is there, including signing the petition. That is the first step to getting involved, is to sign the petition. That will send a letter to your local legislators asking them to support this resolution. It will also put you on an email list to get continued information from us. Now, if you go to the website, if there was something said in this podcast and you have a question, we've set up an email address exclusively for this. It's askmi@cosaction.com. Bruce, thanks so much for sitting down with us. This was a lot of great information. Kelly, thank you as always for hosting and putting together some great questions. And now to the audience, please volunteer with us. Bruce and the other region captains in every single corner of the state need volunteers, whether it's a district captain or a social media warrior, or maybe you like to write and you would like to write for us. We have roles for people who want to get involved. Just like this is our fight. This is our time. This is our way out of what we're living under, this rule out of Washington, D.C. This is peaceful. This is legal. And we are offering you all sorts of ways to get in touch with us, especially as we get into some months, or you can turn into Kelly does Facebook Live every other Thursday night at 8:00. So visit our website, sign the petition, and get active in your own backyard. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in and stay with the fight.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. My pleasure.